Welcome back, Seekers and Saints, to Fire in the Bones vlog. And if you're not from Parma Heights Baptist Church, welcome and thank you for joining us. If you are not from Parma Heights Baptist Church, or if you missed last Sunday, this is based off the sermon from July 30th on 2 Peter. So you should go back to that if you want to get a good idea of where I'm basing this from. But just as a quick recap, the Pastor Shane preached on 2 Peter 3, starting at about verse 11 and moving on for a few verses as he closes up the chapter on what to do now that we know about the end times. And so what Pastor Shane talked about, and really he's just kind of going off of what Peter says, is that now that we know what we know about the end times, that you shouldn't scoff, you shouldn't deny, they're very real. What should you do? Well, Pastor Shane talked about living purposefully, meaning have a goal, have a focus. He also talked about as we carry out that purpose for God, that is in prayer, in witnessing, in leading others to Christ, in carrying out these good works, we are actually somehow ushering his return, Christ's return. And I really like that he pointed out that how does this work out? Great question. We'll find out. Because I don't even know myself. Because it's God's will that a certain time happens, but somehow we're helping it. How does that work? Don't know. Wait and see. And then also, he tells us to live righteously. This one is key because if you don't live righteously, if you don't let your words match your actions, then you undercut the whole thing. As I mentioned last week, if you are prophesizing the end and it never comes, why would anybody listen to you about anything else? If you're preaching, well, we have to have this standard of sexuality because that's God's standard, and then you go out and get caught in a sex scandal, well, why should anybody listen to your standard then? And it's a just question. So we have to live righteously. And these are all great tips. But I want to give a little practical bit of advice. So how else can we do that? How do we do those three things? And I would like to take you, it's a concept I call immortal eyes. What do I mean by that? Well, if you ever read a fantasy story where you have some being, some person, or I don't know, a dragon, whatever, that lives for centuries or longer, they tend to take a different perspective on things. Whereas someone who lives only 100 years or 50 years tends to look at threats and immediate concerns because that's where they are. They can't look bigger than that. They can't see beyond that. But someone who lives 2,000 years, they tend to get, they start to see a pattern. They start to see, well, why are you so worked up about this one thing? That's going to work itself out. Or why are you so worked up about that thing? That doesn't really matter. Now, take that fantasy concept and make it real by thinking about God, who is eternal, who sees everything from beginning to end. And you get to start seeing how, well, he tends to just look at some of these nitty-gritty things we worry about and goes, why are you worried about that? He can look at 1,000 years the way we do in a history book. And he does it with our time too. In fact, I want to read from you a section from Psalm 2 because it's really telling here. And it says, this is just the first 6 verses. Why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth rise up and the rulers band together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their chains and throw off their shackles. This is the leaders of the world just saying, we're not going to do what God wants. Sometimes they're actually going to oppose us. And we do see that throughout history. But here's the immortal eyes part, 4, 5, and 6. The one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. He rebukes them in his anger and terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountain. Essentially, God is saying, you think that's going to stop me? You think your you burnt down a church? Okay. You think I can't make more? I'm God. I don't know what scarcity is. So we have to take that view of what lasts. God laughs at all these things. Or sometimes he laments because something like the Holocaust is something to lament. But he doesn't despair to the point of lost because he knows I win in the end. I win. So what do we do? How do we do this and carry out this immortal eyes concept? Well, one, as Pastor Shane said, you live purposefully. You bear in mind that, yes, you have a job. I like how Cuyahoga Valley Church put it, you're a missionary cleverly disguised as. You're a missionary cleverly disguised as a teacher, an engineer, whatever. You are not that occupation. You are on mission for God, working with immortal eyes. Because at any moment, you could lose this job, but this purpose never goes away. That's not an easy one to deal with, I agree, but there it is. And live righteously. Carry on, work out your salvation. And don't worry about all these other things that are going on, especially politically. I'm not saying don't vote. I'm not saying don't do that. What I'm saying is when things don't go our way, why are you surprised? We're living in a fallen world. And when things don't go our way, especially politically, what, you think that's going to stop God? I've actually heard people say that. Oh, then Jesus is going to lose. Jesus is going to lose because that Democrat won? Really? What? The one enthroned in heaven laughs, the Lord scoffs at them. Do you really believe that? Because if someone who says something like that isn't looking with immortal eyes, someone might say, well, we'll see what that guy does, or I don't like that bill passed, that's not good, but I'm going to live out my purpose because that's immortal. Because remember what Jesus said in Matthew 24:35. My word never passes away. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my word will never pass away. So live and work on the eternal things. And when things don't go right, just look at it and say, well, God's still going to win. Easier said than done, I realize, but have those immortal eyes, and it'll help carry out a long way. So here's the conclusion of the matter. If you get nothing out of this is, if God laughs at the setbacks of the world, why don't we? That's all I got for today. So thank you for tuning in to Fire in the Bones vlog, and I'll see you next week.